Wherever we find oppression, wherever we find tyranny, we will expose it at the Counter Signal. We are not going to follow the narrative. We will rail against the Great Reset, and we're going to have a great time doing it. I usually start these videos by saying, hey there, I'm Keean Bexte. I'm here with Rebel News at the scene of whatever it is, sharing the other side of the story. Whether it's in Hong Kong, standing alongside the democracy protesters who fought so valiantly in that once free city 2 years ago now before the pandemic against Xi Jinping and the Communist Party of China. Rebel News came to Hong Kong trying to uncover the other side of the story, to share with the world the side of the story that Beijing doesn't want the world to hear. We came to Hong Kong just a few days before a massive election was held, and it really was a historic election for Hong Kong. Keean Bexte here at the White House in Washington, D.C. for The Rebel. Keean Bexte for Rebel News here in Madrid, Spain at Climate Alarmist Central. Keean Bexte here in Washington, D.C. Keean Bexte here with the Rebel Media just outside of Tuskegee, Alabama. Whether it's in Montreal, Washington, D.C., here in Calgary, wherever it is, I always try to share the other side of the story. I always try to stand up for the little guy, to give them a voice against government oppression, tyranny, violence. Standing up for the little guy and giving them a voice is part of what we did at Rebel News. It's part of what made me so proud to work for that company. I started at Rebel News 3 years ago now, over 3 years ago, after I leaked documents that I obtained from the dairy cartel in Halifax. It was a really exciting time for me. I had never been in front of a camera, and if you go check out my very first videos, you'll see they are pretty cringy, but I learned a lot. I learned a lot over the weeks, months, and years that passed. I fought a lot of battles, and we won a lot of battles. We won against Justin Trudeau time and time again after he tried so hard to keep us out of those leadership debates. We won in court, we won on the streets, we won wherever we went. And guess what? I'm still not tired of winning. I wanted to let you know something that has changed in my life. Just a month ago, I've decided that I'm going to go independent. I'm going to start my own podcast where I'll be able to tell the other side of the story in a different way, in a way that's a little bit longer form, a little bit more in depth, and more talking with important people, exciting people, people who have information that we can use, we as Albertans, Canadians, and people, to fight against the elites and tyrants wherever they may be. I'm starting this podcast and it's called The Counter Signal. You might remember that name. That was my show with Rebel News, The Counter Signal with Keean Bexte. If you go to thecountersignal.com, you'll be able to see exactly what's going on there, and I'd encourage you to sign up. Now, normally I don't know exactly where you would have seen my content. It might have been YouTube, it might have been Twitter, it might have been through the emails that Rebel News sent out. I'm not going to have access to those channels anymore as I'm an independent broadcaster and reporter and journalist, so I need to stay in touch with you personally. If you enjoyed my work, if you saw value in it, there's more to come. I'm very excited to announce the next steps of this podcast with you. The first guest has already been booked, and we will be recording our very first podcast on Thursday. It's one of the most exciting people in Canada in this political time that we're living in. Someone who's standing up for Canadians, someone who's standing against oppression wherever he finds it. I'm going to be announcing exactly who that is, this very exciting guest, someone who many people asked me to speak with in person when I was with the Rebel. I'm going to announce who that is through that email list. So if you go to thecountersignal.com and sign up for that email list, you will be the first to know who this really exciting guest is. And on top of that, we will also email you the very first episode of The Counter Signal with Keean Bexte. This podcast is going to be free for you to listen to wherever you get your podcasts. We want this podcast to arm you with the information that you need to join the fight against the elites, against the tyrants, and against the oppressors like Justin Trudeau and Xi Jinping. Wherever we find oppression, wherever we find tyranny, we will expose it at the Counter Signal. We are not going to follow the narrative.
We will rail against the Great Reset, and we're going to have a great time doing it. If you enjoyed my work at Rebel News, I thank you for your support that you've shown me. From the woman who lent me her basement suite in Enderby, British Columbia, when I was trying to track down a terrorist for a week, to the thousands of people who have sent in tips over the last 3 years. I couldn't have gotten my stories out without those. For example, when someone leaked me from the military, a senior military official, leaked me documents that proved that the Canadian military was infected with some sort of COVID-like virus, was brought back, put into quarantine, and then it was covered up by the defense minister. Stories like that you will not hear in the mainstream media, we will be exposing and continue to expose. If you go to thecountersignal.com, you can see more. Please sign up, and please, let's stay in touch.